What's going on, bros and broettes? It is fall, and fall is, let me show you, jig season. Dude, the jig is one of those traditional baits that absolutely excels in fall, but there's a lot of different tweaks and mods that you can make to a jig, and everybody's got their own little approach. But what we're gonna do in this video is I'm gonna show you some little mods and tweaks that I make to two jigs. We're going to focus on dragging style jigs, not flipping jigs, dragging style jigs. And I'm gonna show you some mods that I make to these jigs to give you better hookups, a better presentation in my personal opinion, as well as just showing them something different, because a lot of these jigs look exactly the same. They get a little boring. The fish see them all the time. So making a few little tweaks to make it a little different, set your presentation aside, can be the difference between getting a big bite, not getting a big bite, getting multiple bites out of a pot of fish, etc. There is one thing that is absolutely true from those old school In Fisherman days, those old school Bassmaster magazine days, and that is jigs catch big ones. Whether it's the bulk of the presentation, the flow of the skirt, or whether big fish just like eating crawfish or bluegill, which is another thing those jigs represent, I don't know, but jigs catch bigs. It rhymes, it works. So hit that like and subscribe button. We are going to delve into the art of making the perfect jig. So there's two styles of jigs that I really key in on during the fall, and one of them is the football jig. It's defined by that football shaped head right there. It's perfect for dragging through brush, through wood, if you have stumps, rock, just about any kind of cover. It has that weed guard, so it comes through things pretty well. However, it is not the best in grass. The other one that I'll have, and this one's actually naked because it's one of the little mods that we're going to talk about, is a ball head jig, just like this. Not as many guys throw this as that football. It's a finesse kind of ball head style jig. However, this in particular model has a fairly stout, however short shank hook. I really like this because a lot of times during fall, yes, we're focusing on catching largemouth for the most part, but a lot of great species to target are the fish that have smaller mouths, such as smallmouth, spotted bass. I catch a ton of really big spots during the fall and a ton of really big smallmouth as that water gets cooler, as that weather changes. And I like having that shorter shank hook because it allows me to hook up with those fish that have a little smaller kind of biting mouth. And oftentimes you're presenting a smaller presentation, a smaller crawfish, maybe a smaller chunk to them. So it gives you the opportunity to put a little smaller trailer on that bait, but at the same time present it on that rock cover, on that gravel bottom. That ball head is awesome on chunk rock, gravel, all those types of things, with the exception of wood. Not the best thing in brush piles. It's okay around stumps, but if you got rock bottom, hard bottom, that ball head is absolutely killer. So let's start with this football jig. This is actually one that I got out of my Monster Bass box. It came straight out. This is a 1/2 ounce jig. If you're gonna get one size, a 1/2 ounce football covers you for 90% of the situations. Usually you're fishing this in anywhere from 8 to say 15, 20 feet of water. What I'm gonna do first off, and this is super traditional, you can see that jig skirt, it hangs well below the hook. So the first mod that I'm gonna make before I throw this thing is I'm gonna get out my old cutters, and I'm literally just gonna find the bottom of that hook and make an absolute mess in the garage. Swimsuit girl's gonna kill me. But I'm shortening that skirt because when I add the trailer to it, I want the trailer to kind of stick out a little ways. I want the trailer to be presented. And I am a believer in smaller, more compact presentations. Whether you like forward-facing sonar or not, one thing that it's showed us is these fish really do respond to smaller stuff. And with the amount of pressure a lot of our lakes, rivers, ponds, whatever are getting, those smaller presentations, they convert into more bites, and that's what I want. I don't know what you want, but that's what I want. The other mod that I'm gonna make on this jig is, you'll notice a lot of jigs out of the package from a manufacturer are gonna come with a stock kind of brush guard that goes well over the hook right there. So it passes well past the barb of the hook. And this is a little trick my buddy Matt Weeda kind of showed me. So a lot of guys will actually, they'll snip out or they'll rip out a bunch of these bristles right here. I don't like doing that because I want coverage of that hook. So one of the things that you can actually do is you can take your scissors. Once again, scissors is a powerful tool with a jig. You flare that jig up, that brush guard, and you flatten it just like that, and you make the slowest, finest cut just on a couple of those. So do you see what I did there? Basically, I've shortened it, but I've still left all the bristles. So basically, there's a lot, I guess a lot less resistance for it to come and press down through the hook. However, if I have something hit here, it still has that stiffness and that protection of the brush guard, protecting the hook, dragging it through cover. The other little mod that I'll do, and you can see, it's just kind of like a little, I don't know, like a little 45 cut that you're making. The other thing that you can do is, once again, these are stock out of the package. So basically that came from the jig manufacturer. It was stuck in that receptor for the football jig and just glued in and sent off. One of the things that I like to do is that hook is not always centered on that brush guard. And the other thing is sometimes cover comes in from the side, and if it comes in from the side, all of a sudden you're hung up and you hang your jig and you lost your jig. It's a very simple mod you can do to make any jig, whether it's a football jig. This actually applies even to flipping jigs, your ball heads. You basically take and you flare out that brush guard. So you go left, and then you go right, and all you're doing is reaching down towards the base of that brush guard and sort of just prying it open. Ironically, a lot of times when you leave jigs in a box, they automatically do this because they get stuck on stuff, and they look kind of crappy, but in reality, from a functional standpoint, this is actually awesome because it spreads out your brush guard cover, so you have more coverage on that hook, but it also, in doing so, creates a thinner brush guard, so you're able to make penetration to that fish a lot better. It's much easier than actually thinning out the brush guard. It keeps you from making a mistake when you're actually thinning out the brush guard. A lot of guys will overcut it, and there's no going back once you chop it. So it allows you to get better coverage, make that jig more snagless, more weedless, but at the same time, you're not giving up any of that coverage, you know, and you can always squish it back together and go back to kind of the original deal. So those are the mods that I like to make on this football jig. Let me show you what I do with this ball head. So the ball head's a little bit different. I actually buy these in bulk. This is, I think it's a Boss ball head. So I buy them in bulk, and then I have a kit up in my Bass Mafia box right here. I make a lot of my own skirts. One of the things that you'll find in fall, depending on the region you're in, your crawfish look slightly different. Mostly, like I'd say 90% are gonna be like green, brown, something like that. But then it's that third sort of accent color that varies. It can be anywhere from orange to blue. Sometimes you'll even see them like turn slightly like whitish, like a milky color as they molt in early fall or late summer. Oftentimes your best bet is to actually like go out, if you're near the water, you can access the water, and go flip over some rocks just as the sun's going down. And it's not so much to catch the crawfish, but what you can do is actually see what the crawfish look like. So I'm actually going to fish smallmouth up in Wisconsin, my home base where I'm originally from, and I know in Wisconsin that a lot of those crawfish, especially in that sort of mid-fall, early fall kind of standpoint, they turn a little blue. So I don't like to go full blue. What I actually did here is I created what I call my custom Mikey Balls kind of skirt. So I tied up and I use these O-rings instead of like rubber bands because they hold up a lot better and I can make skirts and they don't rot in my box. I used Magic Craw, pumpkin, and then a dark green pumpkin. It gives me the best of kind of everything. It's that dark color, that greenish color. It's something brown with that pumpkin. And then the cool part about Magic Craw is an iridescent style color. It looks green at some points, and then you can see as the light hits it, it turns kind of bluish. So it has a sort of iridescent finish that puts that blue in there. And what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna thread this up and I'm gonna show you how to make what I love using, especially for smallmouth and spots, and that's a finesse jig. So you can do this with pretty much any jig, but I'm going to thread this skirt right on here. It's a super easy process putting these skirts on. You find the collar and you just push that O-ring up around the collar and it looks like a hot mess, right? Yeah. Not a great start, but I promise you there is an outcome that's pretty cool in fish catching. So then what I'm gonna do, just to get started, I'm just gonna clip off the top here. That's not where we're gonna end up, but it's where we're gonna start. I'm gonna do the same here because basically when you make these skirts, there's little tabs, and that's what you use to pull through your thing. So right now we have a pretty good looking jig as is. You can throw it like that and catch fish. However, I like doing a more, like I said, finesse sort of approach. So what I actually do is I take this jig and I kind of let the top of the skirt dangle down like that, and I find just above that ball head and I make another cut straight across. And it's not gonna come out perfect. I'm gonna need to mod it, but basically I'm giving it a very tight kind of like trim. And I can see already that I missed some on the front, so I'm just gonna make it, you really want it kind of like a nice circular evenness to it. You can see it's almost like a, I don't know, like when those dogs have to wear those little collars, you know, after they get fixed, kind of deal, a little protector. That's all you're trying to do is just kind of make like a little collar that pops out around the head of the jig. Very super subtle. You can be as detailed about it as you want or as not detailed. I kind of like making them perfect because I want as much confidence as I can have when I'm throwing this thing. So I'm gonna make one more cut. Now, the other step that you're gonna do is just like what we started off with football jig. This skirt hangs down too low on the hook, in my opinion. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm going to kind of make some clips right there, and I'm gonna make another one on the back. Sometimes I like to 45 the back a little bit more, just to kind of make that jig sort of naked on the bottom. I don't want a bunch of bulk. These jigs, I'm really for the most part dragging on the bottom, so I do not want them very, I don't know, very thick when it comes down to it. So this is what you come out with. This is what I would call a finesse jig. It's a finesse ball head. This thing's perfect for like hitting rock, dragging, things along those lines. It's absolutely epic for spotted bass, smallmouth, and you would be surprised too, the largemouth really like it as well, especially those largemouth that are set up on your gravel bars, your shell bars, big boulders, things along those lines. Perfect cover, especially for late fall, because the heat kind of warms up those rocks, and it's kind of like that last late bite during winter and then going into winter when you can catch them on a dragging deal. So the other thing that I want to show you too is there's a million different trailers that you can put on a jig, right? You know, from little kind of like swimming craws to beaver style baits, all those different things. One of the things that I like to do, especially as we get later into fall, is to go super duper subtle. Now, I don't go like full 100% Uncle Josh, like old school, like pork rind kind of deal. But what I do like, this is actually a gambler one, is your classic chunk. So it's this guy right here. It is the most do nothing, plain Jane jig trailer that you can ever like use pretty much. And the other thing that I like to do is I don't like threading my jig trailers. I like popping them on just like that. So they're just kind of dangled on there versus actually threaded up. I think it gives much more fluidity of motion. You can see how that thing just kind of goes back and forth. It's a much more natural action. However, one little trick that you can do if you want to bulk up the bait, or one of the biggest problems with actually doing this kind of trailer or putting it on with this style, is that trailer will fall down and it'll end up all over the place. I got my Monster Bass Box right here. I'm gonna grab out, these are some Excite or X-Zone stick baits. Hey, it's Brendan Palnick. So X-Zone stick baits, and what I'm gonna do is pop it out, and I'm going to commit a very bad thing. So I'm going to just cut, I don't know, like a little chunk like that. So I'm gonna cut the tip off. I can still use this thing, you know, on a Texas rig or something like that, but I'm gonna take this little chunk that I cut off of that stick bait, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to thread that little piece of stick bait onto the shaft of my hook. So you can see it's just kind of on there. It's not very obvious. This is going to do two things, and you can see one already. Do you see how much it flared that jig skirt out? So that jig skirt, because there's a piece of plastic pushing it out, flares out that bottom part of the jig skirt. The other thing that it's gonna do is when I actually put on my little trailer, it's either going to, you can either thread it like that, or you can put it through like a classic chunk, just like that. What it's gonna do is inhibit that chunk from sliding up the hook shank and just kind of curling up and getting all in the way of the jig or fouling during cast. It keeps it sort of up, not perfect, but it keeps it sort of elevated, keeps that bait up, that trailer up, and then it flares out that skirt so you get a much bulkier, more, I guess, classical jig presentation. Try yourself a jig for fall. If you guys got anything to add, you guys always have really good kind of insights on stuff. Throw them down in the comments box, hit that like and subscribe button, and grab yourself the old jig, because jig rhymes with big. Whole jig fish, boys. Oh golly.
Dude. Look at that spotted bass, dude. Fuck. That is the meat pig. Spotted bass. Oh, meat pig, dude.